They say love can survive anything. Time, distance, even heartbreak. But can it survive the end of the world? This is the story of Casey Pearson, a woman who thought she'd escaped her past, her father's paranoia, and the endless shadow of doomsday drills. She didn't believe in the apocalypse. Not until it arrived, clawing, growling, and hungry for everything she'd ever known. And when the dead began to rise, Casey learned that the only thing harder than surviving the end of the world was surviving it with her high school enemy. Casey Pearson grew up in a world where fear wasn't an emotion. It was a lifestyle. Her father, a die-hard doomsday prepper, believed the end was always one sunrise away. While other kids went to birthday parties or cheer practice, Casey was learning how to purify water, count bullets, and identify edible plants. Her father's basement was a fortress of canned goods, flashlights, and apocalypse blueprints. And for years, Casey played along. Not because she believed, but because she was his daughter. But by 18, she'd had enough. Enough of the underground shelters. Enough of being the weird girl at school who smelled faintly of disinfectant and bunker air. Enough of her father's paranoia dictating every breath she took. So she packed her bags, swore she'd never look back, and left. Left her father. Left that life. Left the small town that made her feel like a ghost. She was free. Or so she thought. It started small, a few headlines, a few strange cases. A mysterious virus. People getting sick, then violent, then gone. Hospitals overflowed. Governments crumbled. The world turned to static and screams. The infected didn't stay dead. They came back, pale, vacant, and starving. No one saw it coming, except Casey's father. When the outbreak reached her city, Casey ran, not because she believed in the apocalypse, but because she believed in survival. And the only safe place left in her mind was the one she'd promised to forget. Home. When Casey reached her father's compound, it was like stepping into another world. High fences, solar panels, trenches, and people, survivors, all moving with quiet precision. Her father stood at the center like a general in a war he'd always known was coming. He didn't look surprised to see her, just prepared. But there was one face she didn't expect to find among the survivors. Blake Morrison, her high school tormentor. The golden boy who made her teenage life a misery. The one who laughed when she tripped, mocked her prepper family, and turned her pain into a punchline. And now, here he was, standing beside her father, holding a rifle, looking maddeningly heroic. Life in the compound wasn't easy. Resources were limited. Trust was fragile. And danger was always outside the gates. Casey tried to keep her distance from Blake, but fate, or maybe irony, had other plans. They were assigned to the same watch shifts, the same scavenging runs, the same endless hours side by side, watching the world decay beyond the fence. At first, they spoke in clipped words and cold stares. Then something changed. Blake wasn't the same boy she remembered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something older, heavier. Regret. He apologized one night, voice low, eyes fixed on the stars. Said he was young, stupid, scared of being weak. Said he wished he'd known her better. Casey didn't answer, but when their hands brushed over a shared flashlight later that night, she didn't pull away. Every trip beyond the fence was a gamble with death. The infected roamed in packs, half human, half memory. Eyes clouded, movements jerky, driven by nothing but hunger. Casey learned quickly that the apocalypse wasn't about monsters. It was about choices. Who you save, who you leave behind, what kind of person you become when civilization burns. And every time Blake covered her back, every time he risked his life to protect her, the line between hate and something else grew thinner. When they stumbled upon a group of trapped survivors, Casey wanted to help. Her father wanted to shut the gates. Blake stood in the middle, torn between duty and humanity. In the end, it was Casey's voice that swayed him. They saved the survivors, but at a cost. A breach in the fence. A night of chaos. A loss too heavy to name. Days turned into weeks. The survivors rebuilt what they could. They planted, fortified, adapted. And somewhere in that fragile rhythm of survival, Casey began to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Her father, once the paranoid prepper, became the reluctant leader everyone depended on. For the first time, she saw the strength behind his madness, the love behind his fear. And Blake? He became her unexpected ally, her friend, her heartbeat in the silence. Every stolen glance across the fire, every near-death escape, every quiet conversation beneath the stars, it all built towards something undeniable. One night, after a supply run went wrong, when Blake carried her back through the gates, covered in blood and shaking from fear, Casey realized the truth. The world might be over, but her heart had just begun again. But love doesn't bloom without consequence. The compound was cracking, leadership questioned, supplies running low, and trust slipping away. Her father wanted control. Others wanted freedom. And Blake wanted her to choose. Choose between loyalty to her father or a future that might never come. During a violent storm, the infected breached the outer fence. Chaos erupted. Casey and Blake fought side by side, hearts pounding in sync, as the night turned to fire and screams. And in that desperate moment, between life and death, Blake pulled her close. Blake, voice trembling. "If this is the end, Casey, I'm glad it's with you." She didn't answer with words. She kissed him, fiercely, defiantly, as the world burned around them. When the storm cleared, not everyone had survived. Her father stood at the gates, weary but proud. For the first time, he looked at Casey not as his daughter who ran away, but as the woman who came back to save them all. He told her he was wrong to let fear control his life. That survival meant nothing without living. And Casey finally understood. Her father had spent his life preparing for the end. She would spend hers building a beginning. Weeks later, the compound stood strong again. Fewer people, fewer supplies, but more hope. The virus hadn't vanished. The danger hadn't faded. But humanity, stubborn, reckless, loving humanity, endured. Casey and Blake worked side by side, not as enemies or survivors, but as partners. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they sat in silence, holding hands, watching the horizon blaze orange with another uncertain dawn. And in those moments, Casey realized something her father had never taught her. You can prepare for disaster. You can plan for chaos. But you can never predict the heart. Because even in the ashes of the world, love finds a way to bloom. Jeneva Rose's Dating After the End of the World is more than just a zombie romance. It's a story about healing old wounds, finding light in the dark, and discovering that sometimes the end isn't a finish line, it's a doorway. It's about forgiveness, about facing your past, and about falling in love when love seems impossible. Because no matter how loud the apocalypse roars, the quiet beat of a human heart still means there's hope. The world may have ended, but for Casey Pearson, it was only the beginning.